I'm Michael Arnold, and today we'll be going through a lesson from the Toastmasters curriculum called Building a Team. Now a little bit about myself. I'm a husband, a father, and a 2-time TEDx speaker talking about teaching kids better problem solving and the cure for lazy leadership. I'm trained as a Shannon Red X journeyman and a Six Sigma black belt, which makes me an expert on talking about innovative, complex problem solving and the leadership involved with problem solving. I'm trained as part of the John Maxwell team, meaning that I can teach, coach, and speak about John Maxwell's leadership and communication techniques. So let's sit back and let's learn about building a better team. What do a chef, motorcycle racer, and a restaurant owner all have in common? Martin moved here from South Africa with his wife and opened up a chain of sandwich shops. Unfortunately, during the Great Recession, no one was buying sandwiches. So he had to close all but one shop and look for a real job. Carl always had the desire to cook. He studied to become a top chef and worked as the lead chef at one of the best steakhouses in town. But he got tired of working every Saturday night and was soon looking for another job. Mark followed his passion in high school and became a motorcycle racer. He had a pretty good career, but then ended up working as a motorcycle mechanic in a shop until the shop closed due to the Great Recession. He went on to Clemson and got his bachelor's in mechanical engineering and soon was looking for a job. What do they all have in common? I hired them for my team. Today, we'll learn the benefits of a team and how to craft a diverse, effective, and empowered team capable of accomplishing the goals and visions that you set out before it. You'll also learn the skills as a leader to be able to coach your team through the inevitable roadblocks that'll come up as they go. Most work is done within teams. At companies, it's where ideas are generated, projects are implemented, and where people spend the majority of the time. But it's also where people experience stress, conflict, and confusion because of unclear goals and conflicting goals. But what is a team? A team is a highly interdependent group of individuals that need to work together to solve a problem, make a decision, or implement a specific project. The next question is what makes an effective team? What are the benefits to the leader of an effective team? More time to focus on organizational issues and less time spent on daily activities. Google researchers investigated 180 teams, measuring group dynamics, skill sets, personality traits, and emotional intelligence to determine what makes an effective team. What did they find out? Effective teams are less about who leads or plays a part on the team and more about how the team works together. Let's look at what that really means. Here's a list of the dynamics of effective teams. There's 5 things: psychological safety, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. What doesn't lead to team effectiveness? The location of the team, consensus decision making, extroversion or introversion of the team members themselves, and individual team members' performance. Workload size, seniority, tenure, and team size also didn't matter, although previous studies have found that teams of 10 or less are more successful. I'm also including a team effectiveness guide to help you and your team determine, are they effective or not? It's kind of an eye chart, so it'll be available for download, either from Anderson University's website or from my website, themichaelarnold.com. Most teams suffer from a lack of psychological safety due to leadership. 20 years ago, I moved to South Carolina for a new job. We had a team building exercise, tackle football. My plant manager, we'll call him the safety, tackled a player out of bounds and body slammed him to the ground. I can still remember hearing the crack. The safety is now a motivational speaker, sharing how your business can squeeze the efficiency out of their people. Would you want to work for somebody like the safety? I didn't either. I quit after 6 months. If a leader wants to improve the team effectiveness, they need to ensure the team's psychological safety by not body slamming them. Here are some other tips and suggestions on how to improve psychological safety of your team. Demonstrate engagement. I use management by walking around. Studies show this is a very effective management technique, especially compared to leaders who spend all of their time in ivory towers except to come down and inspect the troops. At my first job, we had a Japanese coordinator who would go out on Friday afternoons and walk line to line and yell, "Banzai!" Why did he do that? Because our team's members were paid for how many parts they produced in an 8-hour shift. If they got done in 7 hours, they could go home early. So he would go out and yell, "Banzai!" at each line, and the people on the line would yell, "Banzai!" back. Whoever he felt did the best job of yelling "Banzai," he would work on their line the rest of the afternoon to help them get done early and start their weekend early. That's management by walking around. Next, showing understanding. 10 years ago, I was working as a quality supervisor in adult diapers. Just to be clear, not in diapers, but in the testing lab. When I was offered a job at an automotive startup, my answer, get me out of this crappy business. As a manager in a startup, I worked with the management team on a lot of different issues, and we spent a lot of time fighting fires. A new plant manager came in. Let's call him the kicker. He gave a motivational pep talk to the team. If you guys were responsible for putting a man on the moon, it would have never happened because you're all too stupid. The kicker didn't understand we had been working long days and doing the best we could. His speech completely demotivated the team. In fact, 7,000 people left the plant over the next 5 years. There were only 2,500 people in the plant. I was 7,001. Here's a list of management techniques I saw used during this time. Yelling, late night phone calls, raised office temperature, reduced desk space, and repeated threats of firing and demotion. Let's review another list. Verbal abuse, sleep deprivation, environmental control, cramped confinement, and controlled fear. These are approved military interrogation methods. Be inclusive. Most leaders have an open door policy. They bring you into their office, leave the door open, and then yell at you telling you, "You're a total screw up." I prefer a closed door policy. Come in, close the door, and whatever's said in my office stays in my office, just between the two of us. Be inclusive in your decision making. I think it's better to make a decision and ask for forgiveness than to suffer through indecision. But you need to include your team in the decision-making process. You will make more effective decisions if you do. I discovered consensus and team input is not always possible, but if you let your team know this up front, that you're going to make the final decision if consensus can't be reached or if timing is mission critical, your team will respect that and maybe even appreciate it if they're an effective team. What about the other important factors for team effectiveness? How do you improve those? Let's look at some additional suggestions. We've already covered psychological safety, so let's take a look at dependability. I like to use a RASIC. What's a RASIC? It's where you define your team's roles and responsibilities for each step of the process by defining who's responsible, who approves, who supports, who's informed, and who's consulted for the different steps. If your team's aligned, they'll actually work cross-functionally to help each other out to reach the goals. But if your team's not quite as aligned, or if your different team members have roles and responsibilities that are so different, then it's very important that you use a RASIC so they understand how the process flows step to step and person to person. The next, clarity, clarity, clarity. I like to regularly share the team's goals and how they're progressing towards those goals. We do that fairly regularly in our team meetings, at least once a month. But then also I like to do a quarterly review where we look at what we need to start, stop, and continue doing to reach those goals. Then we do the same thing yearly where we review how we did the year before and what we need to start, stop, and continue in the new year to be even better than we were the year before. Meaning, I've found showing gratitude to your team through donuts is a very effective way to show your team that you appreciate what they do working every day. I believe this is one of my most important jobs as a leader. Showing gratitude, not bringing donuts. Although they really love the donuts. Impact. Again, aligning the team visions and goals so that they understand what their individual contributions are towards those goals ensures people understand their meanings when it comes to the overall success of the team. But it's also important to recognize people individually in front of the team as well as within the rest of the organization. Now that we know what makes an effective team, let's look at how you build your team. How do we organize the team? First, we select team members, then we review the goals, establishing parameters based on the goals. We develop a plan to meet the goals. Then we assign roles and responsibilities for each individual team member. Then we establish the measurements for how we're going to measure those goals. And then last but not least, in fact, actually probably the most important, we build team trust. As a manager in a startup, I looked for diverse experience, knowledge, and passion in my future leaders. As I mentioned, I found it in a head chef, a motorcycle racer, and a restaurant owner, each with their own unique leadership styles. I didn't look for mini-me's, the mistake of most leaders. Being a problem-solving leader, we trained in complex problem solving, preparing us for problems we had never seen before. We identified a common goal to focus on, and then we solved our biggest problems step by step. Ultimately, they all grew into leaders responsible for their own areas. Empowerment. The success of a leader depends upon the ability to share power with others and let them direct their own work. But where do you start? Let's look at a garage startup for an example. Bobby Edwards told me, "Mother is the necessity of all invention, and my mother was constipated." As a result, Bobby and his mom made a big splash by creating the Squatty Potty, even landing a deal on Shark Tank. I asked Bobby, "What kind of leader are you?" He said, "I didn't even consider myself a leader until success led to investors who wanted Bobby to implement more control within his company." His people were worried the investors would replace Bobby, destroying the DNA of Squatty Potty. Luckily, Bobby realized he needed better processes and more people, but he didn't need more control. He has a talented team of smart people he considers family. He empowers his team by opening up the financials to the entire company, allowing his family to understand what it takes for Squatty Potty to be successful. The last thing Bobby Edwards told me, that's the kind of company I run. And now, everything is unicorns and rainbows. Who wouldn't want to work for a leader like Bobby? First, don't micromanage. Imagine your boss comes and asks you to paint a wall. You love painting, so you paint this beautiful mural all down the side of the wall, and everybody says, "That's a beautiful mural, Michael." Then the next day, your boss comes in, and you're standing there waiting for him, all proud of the mural, and he looks at you and said, "But I wanted it painted red. Repaint that with red." You do it because he's the boss, right? So then I repaint the wall. Next day the boss comes in. What does he say? "That's the wrong shade of red. Paint it again." Now, are you excited about painting that wall the third time? Not at all. You paint it because, again, he's the boss. But then you go back to your desk and you sit down and you start looking for a new job because you have joined the 70+% people at most companies that are disengaged. Next, you need to balance freedom and coaching. I use weekly project review meetings and monthly coaching one-on-ones to do this with my team. We agree and assign the task for the projects, we review them and the progress in the weekly meetings, and then I coach them on anything that they might need coaching on in the monthly one-on-ones without other people around. Next, make it clear you trust your team. This requires you to walk the talk, which means not saying, "I trust you," but then micromanaging or questioning everything they do. Next, promote your team to the organization. This is a leader's most important job. I've had the most success during my career when my boss was talking about what I was doing to contribute to the success of the business to the entire organization. I use quarterly marketplaces where every quarter we present to the organization the projects that we've been working on. I also like to use customer visits to advertise to our customers the success of my team members. The best leaders realize they work for their teams and not the other way around. I already mentioned my team trained in complex problem solving, training in both Shane Red X and Six Sigma, both statistical problem solving methodologies. In a startup or even a new job, you don't know what you don't know. Complex problem solving skills are essential to success. As a manager, I'm not a huge fan of meetings, but they are effective for communicating both to a team and even one-on-one. But they need to follow an agenda. Not overly detailed, keep it simple, silly. My weakness is not kryptonite. It's organizing and project management. Plans and timelines are the tools of the trade, but as the saying goes, as soon as they start shooting, the plan goes out the window. I like to use goals and checklist. You need to establish a goal for your team and let them determine the way to reach that goal, but then give them a checklist to make sure they don't miss anything that might be mission critical. The last 2 points, communication and conflict resolution, really go hand in hand. I have a whole other presentation just on conflict resolution, so let's just focus on communication instead. If your team is working effectively, they are communicating, and this will result in fewer conflicts. But when a conflict does arise, ensure your team stays in dialogue. What does it mean to stay in dialogue? Not using ultimatums or words like never, always, or saying things like it can't be done, or using passive-aggressive type questions. And you need to train them if a conflict does arise and can't be resolved, to elevate it to your level for support. If your team really feels safe taking risk and staying in dialogue, it will be engaged and effective in resolving issues without elevating every disagreement to your level. We have covered a lot of material today. Let's review what we've learned. We've learned what makes an effective team: psychological safety, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. We've discussed how diversity of style and experience leads to a successfully organized team. We reviewed the importance of proper training and coaching of the team to ensure they understand the visions and goals they're working to accomplish. And we discussed the changing roles of leadership and how a successful and effective team will lead to new leaders throughout your organization through communication that includes staying in dialogue and empowerment. If you have any questions, feel free to visit my website, themichaelarnold.com, or visit us at a regular scheduled Toastmasters meeting to find out more about leadership and presenting. I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I hope you learned something and enjoyed the video. Thank you very much.